But there's one thing, and I do ask voice actors, do not do this, please. Don't do this because it bugs me, and it's probably going to bug some other producers.
Welcome to Behind the Slate, where I sit down with fellow voice actors and other industry artists to have a fireside chat. I'm your host, Christian O'Boyle. If you'd like to know more about me, please check out my website at christianoboyle.com. In this episode, I'll be talking with Benjamin Tuttle, a real-time animation producer and writer, whose work has been premiered in a few festivals, such as the ARS Independent Film Festival in Katowice, Poland, and the Machinima Expo. He's currently working with iClone and Unreal Engines for his productions. In his spare time, he also creates 3D models and writes screenplays for various upcoming productions. What is something that got you into writing?
It started 10 years ago, actually. I picked up a game called The Movies Game. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or anything like that. It didn't sell very well. I've watched them review it on the old G4 network, and I thought this would be interesting to make movies. It turned out to be like a sim thing, but you could make movies on the side. I didn't give a crap about the sim thing.
Right.
And I found it to be very limiting. And then I used to type in text. I didn't have voice acting, so I made a bunch of comedies. It took me like a day and a half, and I just released them online, I think around 2009. They're gone, so I don't think anybody will ever see them. They're completely just, they're wiped away because the entire server is gone.
Right.
No more.
I know that feeling of creating something and then it's just like, wait, I forgot to back it up.
Yep, and I still have my first screenplay I ever wrote. I gave it to somebody, he calls it blackmail.
What?
Yeah, it's not that good. It's terrible, actually.
So within 10 years, it kind of formulated into what you're doing now. Now, where did animating your stories, when did that kind of come into play that you're like, I'm going to animate these?
Well, with iClone, I believe I won it in a competition because I was still working with Machinima during its heyday. And I was working with the Movies Game where I could actually, I was at a point where I taught myself Blender to make sets. We basically took this giant mod and where you could put any kind of scene or anything like that, and you build your own props around it, and you have to get really creative. You can do amazing things by just kind of circumventing around your limitations. And this actually, it still carries with me to this very day. I still keep this same method when making something. If there's something that I can't do, I'll find a way around it and work with it. So there's a small community at the time, and we helped each other. I don't know how many times I've been scouted for roles. I think I've been cast for 60 roles. I don't voice act whatsoever. It is that small where if you have a microphone, you're going to get a role no matter what you do. And you don't even have to audition. They just approach you and say, hey, I'm making something. Do you want to be in it? Okay, I guess. And that was how it was. Modding, making props, writing. It was a very collaborative community. And to this day, it isn't as active as it used to be. It's kind of like sadly, it's become a ghost town.
Right.
But there were connections that still persist to this day. I've met people, actually not too long ago, I met somebody in Los Angeles who lived in the area. And we just sat and had a talk, and that was that. But as for your question about animating, I didn't get iClone until I wanted a competition, I think 2010. And I did not have a very good view of iClone. I called it, if you ever seen the Dire Straits Money for Nothing music video. It was made in 1980. The characters were blocky and animated. I compared it to that because everybody did dancing videos. There was no good storylines or anything like that. I was very dismissive of it at the time. I thought it didn't look good. I thought, why would I be bothered? Then I got the copy and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I applied the same skills I learned from Machinima onto there, and I realized this is actually pretty cool. and I found out what people were doing. Like at the time, I was going to school for film, and I'm thinking nobody uses a close up. Nobody
Right.
uses this. Nobody does this or this or this or this. And then I started making my own. I made a little short. It got ripped to shreds by a German filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
and he went all out. He's like, "No, you got to do this. You got to do this. Why are you doing this? Don't." It's like I was doing something what I call bobbleheading, and this
Mm-hmm.
was a common error that many people made. They had their characters completely stand frozen still, and they puppeted the head where it bobbed up and down like a bobblehead. And it he said, "Don't do that. Don't do that. Use the idle. Work with this, and use facial animation." And I'm like, facial animation? It's like there's a tool you can use it. It's very primitive. It's gone a lot better now.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of realized, oh, you can mess around and people connect to it more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I made my first production using iClone, and I put it on Vimeo. And then I got a message later saying, hey, we're looking for anything like an iClone or anything, any real time animation to be used in a film festival in Poland. Can we use your video?
Nice.
And this stuff, and it was really cool because it was shown alongside Red versus Blue and all these famous works and everything else. And there was my little film right there. Like, what the heck? It was my first one. But it shows. It took me 6 months to make. It was a very personal little film.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me everything how to make a film. And I cloned it and it worked.
Awesome. So using iClone, and then you started implementing Unreal into your productions. How has this helped you tell your stories?
I think it's a great way. It's like I said, getting creative what you have. iClone is very, very limited on set design when Unreal has a very powerful creation tool. You have much more money thrown into it, a lot more developers working with Unreal. But
Mm-hmm.
iClone has the easiness of the animation. You can animate a character and do it instantly and just bring it over. And I just got the live link from Reolution to bring into iClone, and it makes things so much easier. It's an instantaneous result.
Mm-hmm.
There's no going back and forth because there was a production was working on. We were using Blender and iClone together, but we found it way too tedious to continue with
Right.
it. It
Right.
will be in Unreal because it's instantaneous. I get instant feedback, and that's critical in my
Mm-hmm.
productions.
Mm-hmm.
When I started with iClone, by the way, I had an old HP Pavilion computer from Best Buy, cheap $300 one.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 3 hours to render 2 seconds of footage.
Whew.
I ran it, the whole thing would heat up and freeze the computer. I go and study or do whatever I need to do, come back 3 hours, and there's 2 or 3 seconds of a single shot.
Woo!
And if it didn't work, I had to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. I had a very strict set of standards I had to follow.
Mm-hmm.
If a shot looked bad, and I didn't even get the 60 frames per second, I got 2 or 3 frames per second.
So has this kind of helped your writing kind of develop by knowing how you're gonna set up the scene, how you're gonna write, animate it, and stuff like that? Has your writing kind of developed around animating?
At times it does, but sometimes it doesn't. I will think of something that I've kind of maybe it's a little bit both in a way.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain things I can't do, or I just simply write the screenplay and work around it
Mm-hmm.
and get creative. I think that's kind of an interesting role. Like I treat every role differently, from script writer to I'm directing. There's it's kind of weird to say, but there's two versions of me when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to production. Well, three versions. There's the script writing, there's the directing, and there's the editing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those three don't get along. Sometimes I'll look into it 6 months down the road and thinking, why did I write this? And I completely change the ending.
Right. Right.
Or I go and fix it. I did change the ending for Phantom of my recent Western because I did not like the ending.
Mm-hmm.
So I recorded my lines again, changed the complete ending around, and just released it.
Right.
and that was right before I finished production. So it's very different, but it allows me to. I just think of the moment right now when I write. I don't think of, oh, how am I going to do this? I wait till my director self fixes it. It sounds a little weird.
No, it makes sense. I understand having one idea set up, and as you actually start implementing in the next step of your project, you realize, well, that's not possible, or that doesn't flow. The idea was a good idea, but it just doesn't coordinate with what you're trying to do. So it makes sense in terms of having one thing you're like, yes, I love this idea, and you get it next stage, you're like, what was I thinking? What? Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, it was like that. There was a production I was attached to, and this was a fan project. Unfortunately, I can't do it. I met the writer. Guy, it was a James Bond film,
Mhm.
and there's so many strange ideas. I was like, what the hell? Like, I can't do this. So I got creative with certain ideas. It
Mhm.
worked for a period of time, like fight scenes. I kind of treated like fight scenes like various things I cut very close up, or if I had to frame in a certain way,
Mhm.
whereas characters getting punched and worked. And it kind of taught me how to film a fight scene
Mhm.
or a car chase scene. Most of them, like you do a close up, and if there's something an animation that didn't work, I just spliced in another footage and then went back directly into it.
Right.
And it's a great little thing because most iClone filmmakers, one of the major mistakes I noticed, especially way back when, is they always kept their mistakes in the frame.
Mm.
There's always animation glitches. And you've probably noticed this with that Chance to Hide, the film you were in,
Mhm.
and they kept cutting back the characters back and forth once in a while.
Mhm.
There's like a reaction shot, and it cut back to your character because there was a glitch. It was like something with the hair, and it didn't work out right. I didn't like it, so I cut it to her, and then cut back to you, and nobody knows.
All fixed.
Yep.
Awesome. So what is the future of Unreal production, and how is that going to implement and play into the way you create projects?
This is actually a very interesting question because there was something. I was at SIGGRAPH this year in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and Unreal was a huge factor into it. You had a company like Quixel who made a short production. It looked photorealistic, but they used a 1080 Ti and they
Mhm.
used real time. They literally, like, there's scenes where they got VR equipment and they pretended like they were the camera person. It was a
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
interesting approach. But the one person who was presenting was Jon Favreau. He was the director of The Lion King, Iron Man, and I think he's the showrunner of The Mandalorian. He used Unreal. The Rogue, if you ever seen Rogue One, the android,
Mhm.
real time
Mhm.
animation.
Really?
Yes, because
Hmm.
they want Alan Tudyk. He's a comedian. He's a
Right.
comedic. This is a comedic character. It doesn't work very well if you have to give time. With comedy, it's about the timing.
Mhm.
So they brought his character in. They might have refined it later on, but
Mhm.
they wanted instant feedback, and it worked very well. I mean, his droid character in a Star Wars film, when it comes to comic relief, it's gold. It's
Yeah.
He hit mark every single time. He was a great character,
Mhm.
and he had time to work with it. When you had past, 3D characters in CGI or anything like that in Star Wars that kind of missed the mark, you kind of felt something was a little off, but you didn't feel it with him,
Mhm.
with his character. So Favreau had a really interesting chat. He used Unreal in Previs for The Lion King, and then he used it for The Mandalorian. And he said someday, and this might be pretty soon, that someone like me or somebody working with the Unreal program can make something as good as Hollywood.
Right.
That, especially these days where everything is in streaming. I mean, Disney Plus is releasing soon.
Mhm.
I think where it's headed, streaming sites like Amazon and Disney Plus, Hulu, it's becoming the norm. And then you're going to have a chance for independent filmmakers to present. It's much more easier to make films thanks to YouTube or Vimeo. And I stick around with Vimeo because that's where you get more. You don't get much more popular attention like YouTube. It's like a big fish in a small pond scenario.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that little thing in the film festival I got was because of Vimeo,
Right.
instead of YouTube. So it gives me opportunity. It gives me an idea just to try to set up a small studio, and with Unreal, you get the real time and ray tracing. Sorry, which gives you a really good look. I mean, things that used to take giant render farms, you could do with a simple 2080 Ti card.
Right.
It's amazing where technology is given, and it gives you a chance to express your storytelling and your creativity. And working with iClone with the real time, I could get a mocap suit for $2,500, and it immediately gives me feedback what to work with. Not only that, but you can get your iPhone X, record your facial animation, plays it back in real time. You understand, you work with it, and then that's really the critical thing. There's no waiting, rendering for days on end to see what your video is. It's right there to tweak and build, and then putting it in to Unreal with the real-time thing. You can actually make really good video in your basic computer.
Yeah. Basically in your garage.
That's it. Yeah. It's a garage,
Yeah.
dude.
So your most recent project, A Chance to Hide, you just released. It was made in iClone and Unreal?
Nope, just iClone.
Just iClone. Okay. And what was the biggest challenges that you faced creating this?
I had a bug when working with this program, and I brought it to the developer's attention. At the beginning of production, I was running at maybe 90 to 120 frames per second. And I brought two characters in, and it allowed me to immediately work with the feedback, smoother animation. And that's really the key to really good work, is your facial animation. And that's the one thing I always get mistaken for good. Everyone thinks I have like an iPhone X for recording or anything like that for the face, using faceware. I don't. That's keyframed. So everything was running in 60 frames per second. I was getting at least 1 to 2 minutes of video a week and experimenting, doing various shots. And then suddenly it crept down to 4 frames per second every time I reloaded the project. And suddenly my production output just dropped like a rock. And I was trying to figure out why this was happening. So I bought a new card. I had a 2080. It's good. It shouldn't. I checked my video. I checked my CPU. I bought a new solid state drive. I did everything I can, but the same problems persisted. And then suddenly I was doing the test. I realized I have 2 monitors, one 4K, one 2K. And I realized that this happened when I bought the new card and everything. It had the same problem where it would crash the program. So I turned off one of the monitors, ran it, worked, and it worked in 60 frames per second again.
So it's the monitors.
Yes, it was the monitors that was causing, or it was actually the program how it handled dual monitor setup. It didn't work. So I just turned it off, and program was back up to 60 frames per second after like 3 or 4 months later of trying to fix it.
So you feel that if you didn't run into this issue with the dual monitors, that your process of creating this project may have been a lot more efficient?
Way more efficient. I probably would have finished 3 months sooner.
Okay.
Sadly, that's the sad case too. It's how it is. But there's a lesson.
There is a lesson. Don't use 2 monitors.
Not for this, not until they fix it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mentioned it to them, like, yeah, we had issues too with the dual monitor setup. Like, what? They went somewhere and they had that issue. I'm like, oh, there it is. Because they didn't know either until we were talking again. I think it was right after the live link thing. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there it is. And it made me happier because I was like, I can work on this now.
Hey, it's not my system and it's not my program. It's my monitors because of my program, but
yep,
easier to do is turn one off so you don't have to deal with it. But that is interesting. So were there any other things that you feel that when creating the process that something maybe got hung up or something went really well or you learn new techniques? What is like kind of your overall experience when you're working on this?
When I built, I actually got to play with cinematography a bit more because they had changed the camera system.
Mhm,
It used to be a fairly simplified process where you would choose your lens and everything. And this was the first time I actually shot with. I made it 48 millimeter by 24 millimeters, so it's 2:1 aspect ratio.
mhm,
This is where everybody's going. You see a lot more Amazon productions that use the 2:1 method now, or
mhm,
2:1 aspect, or they call it Univisium. But then I kind of started experimenting with lenses a bit more with depth of field, and I took a class because I bought it from a charity thing. His name's Shane something. He's a cinematographer who works with McG. If you're ever wondering, if you ever remember Christian Bale's rant on Terminator Salvation, where he screamed out and got really infuriated as cinematographer, that
mhm,
was the guy. But he was very informative. He shows you how to use various lenses, how to light certain scenes, and it's
mhm,
very useful in Unreal. I started applying it because Unreal has a much more advanced camera system than iClones.
mhm.
You work with apertures, you kind of work with everything. It gives you the most. It's like basically handling a real camera and telling you how to film it. That's real fun to do. It's
Right.
So I had to learn how to like how to approach this like an actual centaur. I'm going back to school again because I worked with the Panasonic HVX for a long time. And then I had to get like, hey, remember college? You got to remember all this. You can't do that. You got to go back to it now. No, it's okay. I mean, I graduated in 2013 in film
Mhm,
studies and mass communication. I was really good at the camera. I loved being behind the camera. I just don't like being in front of one.
mhm,
I never liked it so very much. But then I had to, but I didn't really apply much of the knowledge. It was hard for me to get a job in Minnesota. So
mhm,
I went back and became a drafter instead. But I still kept the hobby going
mhm,
because I need something to do and I have a story to tell. And I also write on the side.
mhm,
I do a lot of writing now, more than ever. It just keeps me busy.
mhm,
And now with the situation with iClone and we're Unreal, the SIGGRAPH thing went. I thought this would be an interesting just to go back and try it again, but unlike when I was graduating from college, when I had a lot of pressure to work with, I don't. I don't have pressure. And one of the more interesting things about the SIGGRAPH, my experience is telling people like, yeah, I could do this and this and this and this, and I don't get yelled at or being told what to do. I'm basically my own little studio, my own little boss, and that's
right.
liberating.
Yeah.
Doing whatever you wanted to do. If you wanted to film 4:1 aspect ratio, go ahead. I don't, or experiment or work with what kind of color or anything like that. You can just go have fun, and this is where one of my major advice to anybody: just experiment and go crazy with
Mhm,
your work. Because just that little difference, knowing your style and your storytelling capabilities will take you far. Because everybody will try to emulate or something like one character or somebody will try to do this. It doesn't like it gives you a chance to experiment, but if you try to be this way or this way, it doesn't work out very well in the end. It's
right.
not You gotta do something that's familiar with you.
It makes sense in terms of the only way to grow as an artist is to continue experimenting and applying different techniques to your process. By doing so, you grow as an artist and you become better. Because if you stay in this little rut, you kind of stay in this little platform, you kind of sure, you might have a good process that you're going, but you're not going to excel and exceed, and people are soon going to pass you because they're experimenting. So it totally makes sense in regards to that. When creating a project and a production, what is a general process that you take when creating something?
I usually have an idea and write it down in a notebook. And then I would kind of go as far as I can with the script writing. Sometimes I'll finish the script, sometimes I don't, and I kind of have like 5 or 6 little scripts at a time.
Mhm.
I used to be very, what's the good word? Just jump on a project right away without any thought. It
Mhm.
didn't work out very well. It doesn't, you gotta just kind of pull it back and see what would work for you and how to approach it
Mhm.
carefully,
Mhm.
especially when you're hiring voice actors or getting voice actors or anybody else involved in your project.
Mhm.
It's embarrassing to call off a project without finishing it.
Right. Right.
It's wasted time on everybody's part.
Mhm.
So these days, I used to. It took me like a year to work on a project, or it took. I think for Phantom, it took a year and a half, and it was daunting. It's not an easy film to make. It's so depressing,
Mhm.
and just it gets at you. It's tough to do, but I have to do it. I have to finish it
Right.
because it's an investment. So that's one thing I tell producers, knowing what you get into. So once you lay it out, I write the script and then I start scouting, or I'll start a casting call. And I want to talk about casting because there's a there's a certain way of casting, and this is to any voice actor out there.
Mhm.
I've been in these conversations. Most actors feel inadequate. Like, why didn't they choose me? Why didn't
Mhm.
this? Is there something wrong with me? Not always. There's nothing. Not it's not the situation that a director doesn't like you or anything like that. The most important casting decision when I think of is, do you fit my character? It's not that you're good or you're bad or anything like that. It takes direction. It's a two-way street. You're not going to hit 100%. That's where a director comes in and helps you out.
Mhm.
You don't have to hit 100%. I'm just looking for somebody who would fit the role.
Mhm.
I take it very seriously. I want to make sure you fit the role, what works, what doesn't work, how to work, because it's your character. This is an original character I would most likely make.
Mhm.
This is yours. So I will actually, I don't make the character right off the bat. I would
Mhm.
wait till I get lines so I can build the character, sculpt the character based on voice, personalities. Maybe like if I kind of know I'm familiar with somebody's face, I would build the face a bit. You
Mhm.
know, it's with your character too. Kind
Mhm.
of looks familiar.
Yeah.
And there has been times where I made characters and showed them like that looks like me in a way, and I've never seen a picture of them before.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny explaining it. And then once I get into iClone, I kind of work with the face and I kind of build around the animation, the face. It has a lip syncing tool. So I lip sync first
Mhm.
and then I work on the face and I actually match the animation to the voice. I'm building around the voice, which is the weirdest little thing to me. It's odd to say because most people, when they do ADR work, they have to match, the voice has to match the character.
Mhm.
I kind of do the verse opposite, and it works in my end because I get real time animation feedback to build and work in, and
Mhm.
then the lighting, the shadows, the casting, and that comes later.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
use that to tell my story, like certain lighting, certain like if I want to do a close up
Mhm.
or hiding various things, or my little cheating method. If it didn't work, well, I'm going to hide the shot, or I'm going to do something else.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I go into post, and sometimes along this thought process I will deviate like from what my original idea was, and especially when it comes to color. A Chance to Hide had color in it originally.
Yep.
It
I
was
remember.
blue, yellow, and a little bit of greenish.
Mhm.
I didn't like that at first. I thought it worked very well. Then I suddenly kind of realized I can turn it black and white and change it into a 50s thing, and it works just as well, even better.
Yeah, I definitely feel that the black and white really added that sense of mystery and unknowingness to the film. It was really captivating with that black and white.
Yeah, but I felt the same way where I felt there's a sense, it's like you just don't know what's going on. There's a sense of horror. Horror works very well in black and white.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make, like, I actually kind of deviated. I want to make it much more monstrous looking, just this really gritty looking film.
Mhm.
And having these two characters interact and build just kind of this sense of dread and hopelessness
Hmm.
in a way you don't know what to expect and what's going on. And I thought black and white worked.
Yeah, definitely. I love how Katie is Daniel's little support. He's he's the pessimist, and she's like, "We'll make it. It's okay."
It's okay. I mean, that's how I built the character. Like, I wanted her to kind of try to keep everything together.
Yeah.
This is like, if you probably knew, this is War of the Worlds.
Hmm.
To me, it was like my little precursor thing. They're in a situation where like death could come at them any minute, and how do you react to it?
Yeah.
You either
Daniel's about to literally flip.
Yeah, he's about to fall apart, and
Yeah.
she doesn't want him doing that because the moment he starts falling apart is the moment that they're probably gonna die.
Yeah, definitely gives that sense of suspense, whether he's going to freak out in the moment, especially when the alien is right outside.
You're basically watching in,
Yeah.
and that to me was a real challenge to make. How do I make this alien? Literally, all I did for this alien was make 4 legs in Blender and
Hmm.
put a spotlight in
Hmm.
and put a flare effect. But I want to make that scary. And this is where many filmmakers kind of fail to realize it's sound. Sound is so important for production.
Hmm.
It elevates it just as well. There's 3 types of storytelling in a film. There's narrative, there's visual, and there's audio.
Hmm.
And all of them have to be treated the same. You have to treat it with the same care as each one.
Hmm.
Everybody thinks the script is the most important. I'd say my biggest quote, and I call and some people call bullshit. I think there was a quote I said at this little panel thing I was at when I was in my Mishima days. It caused a little uproar.
Hmm.
I said people who think the script is the only important thing turned out to be bad directors. That pissed people off.
Yeah.
It's something I had to explain because you have to treat every aspect of production with care. That's what a
Yeah.
director is. It's basically putting everything in focus.
Good script is very important. It's the ground. However, if you cast a voice actor, if it's a voice project, if you cast a voice actor that doesn't have the quality and care in it, a bad voice actor can make the quality of the entire project go down. So
Easily.
having a good voice actors in the project will also elevate and keep the project up. Same with audio. Bad audio will bring a project down. So that also needs to have the care. Everything is a layer and it's supporting, like you said, it's supporting each other. If one is bad, the entire bridge falls.
Especially with, a bad script tears everything down.
Hmm.
Bad visuals will not interest a viewer, and bad sound will just kind of, completely just make it dull and
Hmm.
flat. Listen, just imagine if I just didn't do any sound for that alien. You're gonna be like, what the heck is this?
Right.
What the heck? What's this? What's this? No, doesn't look good. And that's one thing I have to illustrate. Like I said, the thing where if everything's in future and streaming. I had a mass comm teacher. He was an old guy who worked in the business for 30 years,
Hmm.
kind of an odd guy. But he said the most important thing, and it sticks out in my mind. These days, people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. There's going to be some day where you're going to have maybe 5 seconds to get their attention or it's gone.
Yeah.
And it made me think, and I'm like, we're at this point. How many options do you get to watch if you have Netflix or Amazon? You don't like the production? You're not going to stick around for a full half an hour.
Nope.
You're gone. Let's watch something else. I don't care. You have that option on your phone. You can do anything you want. You have YouTube. I don't like a video. It's gone in 5 seconds. You're
Yep.
done. It's gone. It's scary. And the worst part is you have to retain the same attention throughout the entire feature.
Hmm.
And how do you do this? You do with good visual storytelling, good audio, and good narrative things. If you
Yeah.
make a boring visual story, nobody's going to give a shit.
Hmm.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
They're gone. And I tried to explain that to somebody, but he got mad. He said he was television producer and all that, but I was like, no, this is it. He's like, why is that? Because that's the way things are.
Yeah, we're in that process now, even with voiceover. If you're sending a demo to an agent or anyone, you have 5-6 seconds to catch their attention because if they have a lot to go through. If you don't catch their attention within 5 seconds, they're they're moving on to the next person.
Yep.
Uh, if you can capture their attention for your entire demo, hands like power to you if you can capture their attention for the entire demo. And I think that's the same for a good production is if you need to capture their attention within the first 5 seconds. And if they like it, they'll continue watching it. And you have little milestones if they're going to make it.
Well, it's sometimes they pick it up and watch or listen to various things, stuff, and go forward. I think Martin Scorsese's film, The Irishman, is 3.5 hours long, and that's going to be on Netflix. So
Mhm.
some people are not going to stick around and watch it for 3.5 hours. They're going to pause and just go in and catch back up. Same thing with the television show. You're not going to watch all 10 episodes of a season.
Right.
You're just going to sit and pick up and where you belong. But if the story's good, you'll go back to it. There is something that you mentioned about the demo reel. Same
Mhm.
thing for auditions. There are some times where I'll listen to an audition, but there's one thing, and I do ask voice actors, do not do this, please. Don't do this because it bugs me, and it's probably going to bug some other producers.
Mhm.
When you go on a very long introduction, or you say, "I'm sorry, this isn't good." Don't say that. Don't
Nope.
ever say, "I'm sorry, this isn't good." Don't. It's like, this is my first time. I'm sorry. And it's like, no, just audition. I don't want to hear any of that.
Yeah.
It gives me a bad impression.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you say, I'm sorry or I'm not good, the very first impression they have is, well, this isn't going to be good. So,
Yeah, it's like, why, if you're holding back doubts, I'm like, don't, just let it out.
yeah.
That's where, good directors will help you along the way. You're not going to hit 100%.
And the thing is, you mentioned it's not personal when you are casting. It's not personal. If you have 50 voice actors audition for one character, that's a lot of auditions for one person. Only one person is going to fit that role. The other 49, I'm sorry, unfortunately, you don't fit the role. Or I just selected someone else. It's not personal, just this one person hit it, and everyone else just didn't meet what I was looking for. Again, it's not personal.
No, not at all. It's like I had a role where there's 130 people who auditioned for it, I think, one point. And I'm thinking, wow, these people are really good.
Yeah.
I would love to cast them in something one of these days. And
Yeah.
this does happen a lot. They're great. I do take down names,
Mhm.
not bad way, but like someday I'll ask them, when the right role comes along, I'll just approach them, say, hey, you want to do this project? I'm sure there's other producers who do this too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not the only one. Or sometimes if there's somebody who's looking for a role, I'll ask. And I still belong in some kind of community. There's always a filmmaker or two who's looking for something, but they're afraid to come over to the voice acting side. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I've tried for years to try to connect the two, like this one community and the voice acting community together. Didn't work out very well, but sometimes because the main question is like, how do you get good voice actors? Oh, right here.
Mhm.
This is where I go.
Yeah.
And there has been a few good iClone filmmakers who's done this approach. Between you and me, some of them use text to speech or Fiverr. Yeah. Oh yeah, yes. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It doesn't seem fair to the actor involved, and
Right.
that's why I like looking. Like the first thing I notice, people have commission rates.
Mhm.
It makes my job a lot easier because when they're asking how much should I pay, like how much, I'm like, oh shoot. That's the first time I'm like, oh, I didn't get this far yet. I gotta think about this.
Mhm.
And my brain just kind of freezes up. And I'm trying to figure out, like, it's kind of like a hit or miss, or like, am I paying too much or paying too little, or I don't
There's a
want to
great
look.
resource. There's a great resource on Voice Acting Club,
I actually
and
looked at that not too
they
long
have
ago.
their indie rate guide, which they just released a couple months ago.
I was happy when I saw that because it tells me, okay, that we should go for this. or go for this, because I think it's fair to pay actors for your work. I don't know if I'm going to make a dime. I don't think I do. Well, in certain aspects, I do.
Right.
But there's sometimes where it builds a much more easier to work with communication. It does get a lot of tension. I'm not going to lie. There's some people who struggle with casting. I say throw a couple of dollars in and see what happens.
Yeah.
You're going to get attention. And it makes sense.
Yeah.
There's nothing negative or anything wrong with it, or unpaid work or anything like that. Except if you're the producer making money, please pay your actors. It's not right.
Yeah.
It's not fair. It doesn't build a good relationship.
In regards to casting, there are other ways, because it can be overwhelming. You said possibly 130 auditions for a single role one of these times. That can be intimidating. And if you don't have time to sift through 130 roles, sometimes hiring a casting director will help kind of alleviate all of that stress, or at least most of the bulk.
Yes.
What we do at Immerse Productions is we have a private roster that we actually send to first. And so we send 2 to 5 auditions for a single role. Now, if those 2 to 5 actors don't fit the role, then we will open it up to the public, allowing people to send in auditions. If we get 100 auditions for a single role, we will sift through all of them and say the producer or the director wants to hear 10 to 20. We will sift through all 100 and send you the 10 to 20 auditions, and therefore you're just hearing exactly what you need to hear, and you're not going through 100.
I think this would be much more helpful. I guess I go down the line. Even though I like subjecting myself to torture, I like being. I'm one of those people who likes being in control of a project every step of the way. But I had to learn to relax, and especially with character creation, I let somebody take the role of the character, and they were like sculpting the character out. I'm like, what the? Stop doing that! And I was getting mad, but then I'm like, I like it, and it turned into a fight at the beginning. But then I realized, oh, this actually looks a lot better than I thought it would be. Go ahead, keep doing it.
Right.
You got to learn to play nice, and I had to kind of take it easy. I'm a huge perfectionist of my work. You kind of notice how much attention to detail I kind of pay attention to every single little shot I do. Everything is precious.
Yeah.
And same thing with the casting. I'm very, very picky about my casting.
And it makes sense. What we try to do, especially for video games or anything like that, what we try to do is we still want to provide all of those auditions, but there are obviously, say you have a specific sound for a character. Well, there's going to be actors that probably don't fit the idea. So we kind of sift through those. There's going to be the actors who unfortunately send in auditions that aren't quality. You can definitely hear the audio reflections and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that will generally get weeded out, especially if you're looking for high quality production. By now, you're at 50 instead of 100. So even still, I can send you 50 and say, hey, I already weeded out all the ones that we assumed already didn't fit the description. So here's 50, and you can go through the 50 and select. So it's not necessarily taking over, it's just filtering it so that way you're not loaded with a ton and you're going, ah!
Yeah, because when I first saw, I'm like, oh, because I went back to the voice acting Alliance days where I only get maybe about 10, 15 per audition. I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad. I can deal with this. And there's one thing about Casting Call Club I want to do. I wish they would make it private.
Oh yeah. There's so often where you see a role and you go, oh, this looks good, and you listen to some of the auditions and you go, well, they're really good, I ain't got no chance, and you don't audition.
That kind of throws away. It's like, it's not if they're really good, it's just, does it fit my character? Does it fit the role? That's the more important thing. Don't cast on popularity, cast on who fits the role. And that's why I ignore upvotes. I completely don't care about them one way or another.
Yeah.
I don't care if this person has 75 upvotes. I don't personally care.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense in regards to just casting call is great setup, but I definitely agree that the producer, or at least even having the option to have auditions closed or open,
I
and that
think that
at least gives it a little bit of flexibility if someone doesn't want their auditions to, like, the actors to be able to listen to all the other auditions. So in regards to kind of the future in resolution, the future of your projects and the upcoming project that you're working on, where would you like to see yourself in, say, 5 years?
I always joke about this to people. I want to become the next Rooster Teeth.
Hmm.
I want to do what they've done. They started small and built up this huge group, this huge studio
Hmm.
full of people. I feel like I could actually achieve this. But I do, like I said, I want to keep my independence in film, like my storytelling. I want to do what I want to do.
Right.
And it's liberating to say, hey, I don't want to do something because it's popular. I just want to tell what I feel like telling.
Hmm.
And I think I'll get there in 5 years. It just takes a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I literally spend a few hours a day just experimenting and working with video and doing all this. Every day for the last 3 months before A Chance to Hide, I was always rendering.
Hmm.
I render, I walk away, and I do something and come back. Or I edit or I fix or do this. It's a lot of work. And this is to anybody who's producing. It's a lot of time.
Hmm.
So before you work on your project, before you start this big project, anybody who's new to it and wants to get into it, and don't do this for popularity, do it for you,
Yeah.
because you know how much the time you invest into your project, popularity ain't going to be worth it. It's about if you enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's what inevitably will keep you going, and everything else will build from there.
Because a year and a half on a very depressing Western will wear at you badly. It will make you depressed and bitter.
Yeah.
And then the Chance to Hide, I didn't get depressed or bitter, but I was like, this is going to be an interesting. And then when I got to the horror aspect, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. So I got to do all this fun stuff, and now I'm working on a new project. It's away from the dark and depressing drama, and it's actually a very snarky comedy. It's fun to make, and I can't wait to start on this because it's so funny. There's so
Mhm.
much fun to be had with.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm
Thank you.
excited.
Yeah, it's like I wrote the script a year and a half ago, and I kept tweaking it and tweaking
Mhm.
it, and I realized, oh, this is because the lead character is like a female version of Ryan Reynolds. I was told that. I
That's
thought,
fun.
oh, that makes a lot of sense.
To look up your previous works, your up and coming works, where can people go to find more about you and more about your work?
Well, I'm at my Twitter is 4413 Media, which I wish I need to update it more. I keep neglecting it. I
Mhm.
feel so bad. I just rebuilt my website, 4413media.com. It
Mhm.
has everything. My Vimeo is the same thing,
Mhm.
4413 Media. It's a pro account. It has a little silhouette holding a bullhorn.
Mhm.
You'll find it easily.
Well, thank you so much for uh, being on the podcast with me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Slate with guest Benjamin Tuttle. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button to stay notified. I look forward to seeing you again.
Well, I actually graduated in 2013.
Well, I'm a little behind the ball.
Oh, I'm sorry if I'm not talking very much
No,
sense.
no, totally fine.
Can I swear or not? I don't think.
Go for it. Depending on the word, it'll be
918 gigabytes.
918 gigabyte.